Hey, today we're going to cover section 9.3, which is solving quadratic equations. And the first thing that I want to show you is what standard form of quadratic equations looks like. If you look at this, you can see one minor difference. They both are ax squared plus bx plus c. Standard form, it's equal to 0, and then the equation form is set equal to y. So ax squared plus bx plus c is the format for quadratic equations. One of the methods to solve quadratic equations is to graph. And I want you to take a look at all three of these graphs for these quadratic equations. And the graphs are what you call parabolas. That is the name of the term of what all of your quadratic equations should look like when they are graphed onto the coordinate plane. This quadratic equation currently is written in standard form, so we could real easily just swap out that 0 for y. So y is equal to x squared minus 16. And you could graph this by plugging in values for x and solving for y, and you would get a graph. And that would show you your solution, because since y and 0 are substituted for the same thing, that means when y is 0, that is the solutions to your equation. So I'm going to graph this using an xy table, and I'm going to plug in 3 different values, and I'm going to be selective in the numbers that I pick for x, just simply because of the size of my graph. Not everything will fit on here because my parameters are only -10 to 10. So I'm going to pick the number, I'll go with, okay, so I'm going to pick 4 numbers, and my 4 numbers that I'm going to pick are going to be -4, 3, -3, 3, and 4. Really, the only reason I'm picking those is because I know that they'll fit on this graph. So if I plug in -4 for x, -4 squared is 16, and 16 minus 16 is 0. If I plug in -3 squared is 9, and 9 minus 17 is -7. If I plug in a +3, 3 squared is 9, minus 16 is -7. And if I plug in a +4, 4 squared minus 16 is 0. So I'm going to graph these over here. So I have -4, 0, -3, -7. Sorry, that did not go on there very well. Then I also have 3, -7, and 4, 0. Now, if I had plugged in 0 for x, you'd get -16, which is, about right here if my graph went a little bit further. But you can see the shape that this graph is going to be. It is, in fact, a parabola. And my solutions is where my y is 0, and where y is 0, we have -4 and +4. So my solutions, positive and -4. Now the other way, actually, that's it. That's what we're going to look at for this one, is where it crosses the y-axis at 0. We do have another way to solve quadratic equations rather than graphing, and that is just by solving using the square roots. So that exact same equation that you just graphed, x squared minus 16 is equal to 0, which we already said was the same thing. We could substitute that 0 for y. Y is equal to x squared minus 16. Well, you know that this is a graph because you have two variables, and we graph using the coordinate plane, which is two-dimensional. So I'm going to go back to this one where it's set equal to 0, knowing that they are the same thing. This one is just so that you can put it on a two-dimensional plane, the coordinate plane, and your solution is where y is equal to 0. But if I go back to this one, the top one, you don't need a graph because you have spent all year learning how to manipulate equations to make them useful and easier. So knowing all of the rules and what I've learned about how I can manipulate equations, I want to get x by itself. So to get x by itself, I would want to add 16 to both sides. And I'm going to skip down here. And if I add 16 to both sides, I would simply get x squared is equal to 16. Well, to find x by itself, you have to undo that square root, or sorry, that exponent of 2. So to do that, you would take the square root. Well, if you take the square root of one side, you have to take the square root of the other side. And the square root of x squared is x. And the square root of 16, I'm sure that most of you are about to say, it's 4. But if you think about it, you can take 4 times 4 and end up with 16, but you can also take negative 4 times negative 4 and end up with 16. So a new notation that you're going to start using here is the plus and minus sign right before each number, because you have to remember that either one of these would be a solution. All right, here's another one. If our equation was m squared minus 36 equals 0, you could simply add 36 to both sides. So your equation would be m squared equals 36. Take the square root of both sides. Square root of m squared is m, and the square root of 36 is a plus or minus 6, positive or negative 6. And let's do another one to show you maybe one that you're unexpecting. All right, so now we have 3x squared plus 15, so we want to isolate the variable. So the first step would be subtracting 15 on both sides. So you would end up with 3x squared is equal to negative 15. Divide both sides by 3, so you get x squared is equal to negative 5. So you would want to take the square root of both sides. And so you're asking yourself, square root of x squared is x. And then you ask yourself, what number can I multiply by itself to get a negative 5? Well, at this point in your math career, we're going to say, no way. There isn't a real number that you can multiply by itself and end up with a negative number, because if you multiply two positive numbers, you end up with a positive number. If you multiply two negative numbers, that is also a positive number. You cannot multiply two of anything and end up with a negative number. So your answer for this, because there is no real number that would solve this, your solution, you're just going to say is that there is no real solution. And you will learn about possible solutions later on. All right, one last one. If you have an equation like 4d squared plus 16 is equal to 16, go through the motions, isolate that variable. So 4d squared is equal to 0. Divide by 4 on both sides. D squared is equal to 0. Square root of both sides. Square root of d squared is d. And what number multiplied by itself gives you 0? Well, it's 0. And you would not put the positive or negative sign out front because 0 is neither positive nor negative. So your solution is just 0. All right, that's it for section 8.3. Remember that there are two ways to solve quadratic equations. The first one is by graphing, which you would simply use y is equal to ax plus bx plus z, or if you want to solve it using square roots, you would do the same thing, except instead of y, you are setting that equal to 0 and manipulating that equation. Good luck.